I recently have talked to a number of people, and this is a topic that is close to heart for me because for anybody who maybe hasn't listened to previous episodes, you may not know that I lost my full-time job 2 months ago. And so now I'm kind of in this space of like, well, what's next for me? And as part of that, I've been having a lot of conversations with people, and there's a rise big time in AI interviews. And it's been very interesting talking to people about what that experience has been like, both from the candidate side and the talent acquisition side. Because of my background in HR, I have a lot of friends in the HR space. And so it's been interesting talking to some of my talent acquisition friends around where their heads at with these AI interviews. But I was actually talking to somebody just the other day who shared their experience, and they said it was the strangest thing I'd ever done, in that they didn't expect this, and they get on a call and it's an AI video avatar. So it wasn't just a chat bot. It was literally they're interviewing with what looks like a person, but it's not a person. And it lets them know it's not a person, but they're engaging in this conversation, and it's asking a bunch of questions and whatever, and they're responding to it. And they said it was the strangest experience they'd ever had, which I thought that was interesting. But they aren't the only one I've talked to who have said, yeah, it was really weird. And some people I've talked to have only done voice ones. I've talked to some people who have done actual chat interactions, which has its own challenges. And then now where we're getting is kind of this, we're faking human interviews. So I'm curious from folks who listen to this, where you sit, how would you feel if you joined an interview and it said, hi, this is an AI interview, but it's looks like a person. We're faking it, but we're telling you it's AI. And how would you feel about that? And if you're a talent acquisition person, how do you feel about that? If you're a recruiter, how do you feel about the idea of, AI bots taking those first line interviews? Now, most of the people I talked to said this was just their frontline interview. This was not, they were not far along in the process. So let me share my thoughts on this, and I'll share it from both sides. If you're a candidate, let me just say this is going to become the norm. So if it is weird to you or uncomfortable, or you feel a little like, I don't like this, while you may be able to say, if a company makes me do an AI interview, it's not a company I'd want to work for, I would caution you to not maybe dig in your heels on this, because I fully anticipate we are going to see way more of this. And I legitimately understand why, for reasons I'll explain later. But I think this is one of the things, if you listen to last week's, I talked about the rise of advanced voice mode. And one of my recommendations was, one good way to use it is to actually practice interviewing. And even more so now, I would say you might want to practice interviewing with an advanced voice mode, if for no other reason, to get used to an AI interview. And you may say, well, isn't it the same thing? And aren't I just talking to a fake person? Yeah, but it was interesting listening to people talk about their experience and how they found themselves actually tripping up more just by the sheer fact they felt like they were talking to AI, and it was throwing off their mojo. And if you can practice it, you're going to be less likely to get thrown off, and you'll become more comfortable with it. So I said before I would encourage people to do it. Here's another reason why: because there's a good chance, if you're interviewing for a job in 2024, 2025 and beyond, there's a good chance you're going to interview with an AI bot. And so you might as well start to familiarize yourself with some of the nuances, some of the areas where things can work really naturally, and the areas where they might not. And how do you handle that? And how do you respond to that? Because it's not the same. And I've talked about how AI is an alien intelligence. It's trying to be like people, but it's not. And it's better to practice that now. And I would just encourage people not to get hung up on the, I refuse to participate in this. You might find yourself struggling to find a job if that's the case. And your best bet is to practice with this. Now, one of the things that I think this is going to make even more important is it's going to be important for candidates to be more familiar with the job they are interviewing for. So if you're somebody who historically has showed up in an interview, hasn't even looked at the job description or the company, that would be a bad decision right now, especially if you end up getting caught with an AI bot. Because what I can tell you about the way interviews work is, especially in those early ones, it's somebody from talent acquisition who probably doesn't know very many specific details about the hiring manager, the job, the team, anything like that. They're just scanning for people who have the basic qualifications. And so AI's analysis of how good of a candidate you are is going to be based on how well do you speak to the things that are in the job description or that are in the company website or whatever it's been trained on. And so you need to be prepared for that. You need to probably be prepared for some of the common interview questions that maybe in the past you've glazed over thinking, well, but I'm really good at connecting with people. Well, AI doesn't connect with you. So it's not going to care if you are friendly and nice and all these other things. Is it trying to get better at read tone and eye contact, things like that? Yeah. But is it very good at it? No. But now it's all being done by a machine. So you're going to want to be very clear and careful how you're doing this, because it's going to catch little details that you didn't think were that important. Maybe the way that the job description refers to things is, I'm just thinking an example from my industry, talent development versus learning versus training. You may have words in your vernacular that you prefer to use for these synonymous things that the job description is written a certain way. And now you use that vernacular, it's going to think you don't know what you're talking about. Now, I may be being a little more intense about it than it really is. AI is relatively smart at being able to discern between this, but these are the kind of edges that you're going to want to pay close attention to, because it may or may not, or it may prevent you from moving on in the job process. And if there's not a human overseeing this, which a lot of companies are just rising to just go, just make all our first line interviews AI so we don't have to deal with it. There may not even be any sort of recourse to say, wait a minute, what are you talking about? And so just be aware of it. It's where things are going. And I'm just going to be candid that you are not going to stop this. So you might as well prepare yourself for it. Now, to companies, I understand that many talent acquisition organizations do not have the capability to even keep up with the volume of people that apply for jobs. Many companies can't. And so I actually think the rise of AI interviews may be a really positive thing and a helpful thing, because you may actually be able to go through more candidates and actually find better qualified candidates through this if you're doing it right. Instead of just not even being able to look at resumes, you may go, here's somebody, not quite sure. The resume may not be jumping out at me, but I feel like there might be something here. Put them forward to an AI interview and see how they perform. I don't think that's necessarily, I think that could be really helpful to a talent acquisition organization. I think where I get a little nervous is when I talk to some of the TA folks that I know who they're pulling too much of the human out of the loop in this. And they're trusting a little too much in these AI interviews and what they can do and how effective they will be. And as a result, are going, we're not even going to look at this until somebody gets to the second or third round type of a thing. And that is concerning. And if you are an HR or business leader thinking, can't we just use AI to interview everybody? Please don't. TA has struggled with AI for a long time, and we have seen some real legal issues come out of AI, especially as we think about, well, gosh, I could probably spend the rest of this episode talking about some of the risks associated with it. But again, you got to remember the AI is only as effective as what it's trained on. So it is going to be biased towards things that sound and look like what it's trained on, and biased against things it's not familiar with. And it's not because it's cognitively choosing that, which will get to my next point, but just because that's the nature of things. And they can tweak dials and they can do these other things, but that's just the reality of how AI works. On top of it, you've got to think about, some people just are, like I said, some of the things of like, well, you don't know a lot about the job. Is it saying this person isn't qualified because they use the word training instead of learning? There are going to be these kinds of things you're going to have to watch out for. And as we automate more and more of this stuff, you may be at risk of really causing some real harm and missing out on some really, really great candidates. Now, what I will just say as a universal rule, and then we'll transition off and maybe come back to this another time, is this had better, if you're implementing this really had better only be for those initial screening things or early on in the process. If you are going to final candidates or final rounds and you're implementing AI, it's a mistake. It truly is a mistake. You need a person to actually be able to connect with the details of what really is the job, what kind of dynamic is there in the relationship, can, because, and it's, people need to be able to work together. And some of that stuff needs to be figured out. And honestly, as a candidate, if you get all the way and they try and take you all the way with AI and you've never had a chance to interact with somebody, I'm working with. And so you, and also recognize you may want to do this delicately. And the other thing I would say is make sure you're being open. I think one of the biggest pain points I heard from people who were frustrated or felt kind of hijacked by this were people who they didn't know that this is what they were experiencing until they got into it. They got blindsided by it. So if you're using AI, fine. Just be really open with people and tell them how the process works. Tell them the role, like make sure that's clear in your communications so that they're prepared. They have a chance to practice. They know what to expect. They can spend a little more time brushing up on the job description in the company before they jump into a conversation rather than just catching them off guard. And so that would be probably the biggest change because that's the one that'll damage your brand big time. People are a little more comfortable with AI if they feel like they're aware. People do not like being blindsided by it.